Now, when Mayor Stockton took over as mayor, he was left with a $4 million surplus and over $13 million in reserves. In only one term, he's spent $19 million more than he's taken in, completely depleting the reserve and leaving us with $5 million in debt. I've heard, well, revenues have been down. In the last 4 years, revenues have increased 8%. The problem is spending has increased almost 15%. And any family owner who has a limited budget knows you cannot do this very long without getting yourself in trouble. He tries to say that, well, it's a recession. Well, Mr. Mayor, the recession wasn't 4 years ago when you overspent by millions. 3 years ago when you overspent by millions. Not even last year when you spent by millions. The recession just happened within the last 6 months. With this tax and fee increase over the past 4 years when there was no recession, regular citizens like me think, what is this going to be a solution for the next 4 years now that we're in debt? And frankly, we cannot afford to find out. One thing that I found interesting lately, this shows how out of touch I believe the government currently is Mayor Stockton's campaign sent out a questionnaire. I don't know if any of you got this questionnaire. And he wants to find out what ordinary citizens think. Now, for a mayor to send out a questionnaire 1 month before the election just shows how out of touch he is. And then let's look what kind of questions he wants to know from ordinary citizens, things I think a mayor after 4 years should know. One question is, should our local governments cooperate more with each other? Do you think? Is the economic situation adversely affecting me and my family? Do you have to ask? No, these are questions that he's asking to find out what the ordinary citizen thinks, and that's one advantage of the DeCosta's administration. I don't have to send out a survey to find out what ordinary citizens think. I am an ordinary citizen. The last question I found kind of interesting because it kind of impacts me personally. It says, do you think that our average citizen is sufficiently involved through voting and direct participation in government? Now, why I find that so interesting is because the Stockton campaign has been constantly telling folks that as a regular 9-to-5er, I don't have the right to be the mayor of Bloomington because of time commitments. Mayor Stockton just admitted he puts in 40, 50, 60 hours a week to be mayor. And I find that interesting. Because anyone with knowledge of the history of our great knows that the mayor is a part-time job. Mr. Jesse Smart, who's in the back of the room, he ran in a seed company full-time while being a part-time mayor. Rich Buchanan was a State Farm employee full-time while he was a part-time mayor. So no, the question shouldn't be, how can I find the time to be a full-time mayor? The question really should be, is why does it take Mayor Stockton full-time to do a job that Mr. Smart and Mr. Buchanan was able to do part-time? Let me talk a little bit about Mr. Renner and his vision, where I think he will take the city. Now, to find out where Mr. Renner will take the city, I looked back at his 2004 congressional campaign and found some information from there on some stances that he made public back then. In my opinion, Mr. Renner is a stereotypical liberal Democrat. Some of the things he supported or opposed back then were, he supported an increase in corporate taxes. He opposed reducing government regulation on the private sector. He supports massively increasing spending for the arts. And he supports the decriminalization of marijuana. Is that what we want Bloomington to turn into? Not for my family, I don't. I think you shouldn't either. So I've told you what the vision of my opponents are. Let me tell you a little bit about my vision, what I see this city going in the direction. First, I'm a firm believer in that we need a limited government. Now, a government should be large enough to supply the quality of life for its residents, but the government should be limited enough, should be small enough that its upkeep is not an unnecessary burden on those it's meant to serve. Bloomington needs to be a business-friendly community. We need open bidding. Open bidding not only dismisses the idea of impropriety, but open bidding also gives our local businesses an opportunity to compete. And we need to support our local businesses. some of the stances I take that show how much support I have for local businesses is I'm the only candidate who's come out and opposed the Main Street corridor, and I'm the only candidate who comes out and has opposed the living wage. We need government accountability. We need to end pet projects and require justification and accountability for every funding request brought before council. So, in 2005, we did not have a choice of leadership. This year, we have 3 choices, but only one option. Steve Stockton and Terry Renner, while they differ by party affiliation, are essentially a different flavor of the same tax and spend product. Now, I'm not interested in padding my resume or title or padding my resume for a shot at a congressional seat. The only reason I'm running is to make this city the best place to be for the family that we call home. So I invite you to learn more about my stances. I'm running out of time. I invite you to learn more about my specific stances on my website, ericforbloomingtonmayor.com. And on April 7th, don't vote the lesser of 2 evils. Vote your conscience. Vote Eric DeCosis, Bloomington Mayor.
I'd like to have all 3 candidates please come up, and we'll do a Q&A. We're running a little bit over time, but we'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions or 4 questions and so forth. So okay, you got any questions? All right, a bunch of them. Judge? You want all 3 to answer that? Okay. We'll go in the same order, sequence.
Okay, well, obviously we have to tighten our belts. Individuals, businesses are tightening our belts. We can make cuts via the elimination of unneeded or low-value activities. That's one way. We can find efficiencies, process improvements. For example, we're looking at making garbage more efficient by using articulated arm trucks, so we can cut the labor force from 3 to 1 per truck. You're going to see, and this is not just theory, this is what we're actually doing. We're going to be reorganizing. We're going to not replace the deputy city manager. We're not going to replace an assistant police chief. You'll see tonight the city talking about a reorganization that will cut a lot of management jobs. The one thing we're not going to do is we are going to avoid cuts in the police and fire department. And we're going to try to keep road repairs up. No increases in sales or property tax. There may have to be some fee increases for the city. But there's a lot of opportunities to cut. Last year, by the way, we did cut the budget by almost $3 million. This year we need to cut $5 to $8 million off the budget because our revenues are down.
I think, again, I would agree with Steve. Public safety's got to be our #1 priority. 500 years ago, when the first medieval cities were forming, those are the core functions they performed. We may have to ask ourselves, though, can we really continue to subsidize golf courses? Now, that doesn't mean necessarily we would privatize. I think Eric had talked a little about privatizing. And the problems with privatizing is that there's not, especially in this economy, a lot of businesses out there that are just dying to come in and spend millions of dollars to run golf courses that are currently operating at a deficit. Now, what you could conceivably do, though, we've got a $240,000 deficit in Highland Park. We've got a $232,000 deficit in the Den and $112,000 at Prairie Vista. You could say, with the possible exception of Highland Park, because it's unusual, we're not going to subsidize you anymore. Whatever you do, you're either going to have to raise green fees or you're going to have to cut back on your services. And we might be able to get about $500,000 out of that $684,000 without too much difficulty. And it avoids the transition costs of moving toward privatization. The other thing is bidding out RIMCO. If cities our size typically spend $2 to $3 million on what we're spending $5.25, that's a large chunk of it as well. Now, beyond that, we do know that the city of Bloomington had spent 6 months conducting a report which said that sending more cars home saves money.